Virgil was an Italian poet who lived in the 1st century BC, and we know about him mainly from his poems, but we also have a little bit of biography. We know he was born in Mantua, which is Mantova in northern Italy, and he died at about 51 in his 50s, and he composed 3 poems. So they go in sort of ascending order. They get bigger as you go on. The first one is a collection of short poems called the Eclogues, sort of short selected poems about the countryside, about shepherds and their lives. Then the Georgics is 4 books. It's longer. All these names are sort of Greek names, but they're actually quite simple. The Georgics just means things about farming, or the farming poem. And it's about 2,000 lines long, and it's all about how to run your farm. So how to raise cattle and plant vines and make honey and all these things. And on top of that, it's full of all these big themes you don't really expect in these things. So, war and peace and love and death and all these different ways. So he really gets a lot into the Georgics and its theme. And then he's most famous for this epic poem. Epic in a strict sense, epic. It's imitating Homer, the famous Greek poet. And it's 12 books telling the story of the origins of Rome, the origins of how a band of refugees from the Trojan War, this ancient mythical conflict, came across the Mediterranean and ended up in what is now Rome and founded their city. So one of the things about the Aeneid is it's full of Homer. So it's really a great response to these other poems, the Odyssey and the Iliad of Homer, which are in themselves very famous and very rich works. So the whole poem is, in one sense, a very good response to these works of Homer. He's this minor figure in the Trojan War, and Virgil picks him out and makes him his hero. He gives him this divine ancestry, and he is the sort of the leader of his people, right? So he is. The great thing about Virgil is we don't often see a lot of these characters, or we don't hear from them so often. We get sort of half glances, things are left unsaid. So you always have to remember that what we're getting of this character is not all that's there. Virgil is always hinting that these characters are much bigger than what he's giving you on the page. So he has often appeared to most people, or to many people, as strict, boring in an extreme sense, or reserved, or lacking all the sort of the charm that we expect from Odysseus, or the sort of the charisma we expect from Achilles. He has to do what he's told because he's on this divine mission. There are lots of moments in the poem where he would like to maybe do something different, and yet the message from heaven comes saying, go to Rome and found your city. So he's very interesting. He's always trying to look out for the interests of his family, his people, and his own personal happiness then is sort of not always in full view. This is a great moment. It's perhaps the most famous. The Trojans are shipwrecked, right? So they're in the Mediterranean, they're trying to get to Rome, and there's this poem opens, storm at sea, lives lost, everything looks terrible. And then where did they wash up? But they wash up on what is now Tunisian shores in a place called Carthage. And Dido, to her eternal credit, Dido is the great female character of the poem. She is a refugee herself. She has come to Carthage, and she is building her city, and she is leading her people. And to her eternal credit, she says, "Come stay with me. You're shipwrecked. I can take you in. You can join our city. No hassle." So that's a great moment of empathy. And at the end of book 1 of the poem, we have this lovely scene where there's a banquet going on. Everyone's feasting. Everyone's happy. The Trojans and the Carthaginians. And it's a sort of as close to happiness as the scene gets. And what happens then through that banquet is very astutely observed by Virgil. Dido is falling in love. So she's noticing him across the room, and she's realizing who he is. He's a Trojan War veteran. They say that he's descended from the gods. He's very handsome, so she's physically attracted to him. And then she says, tell us your story. So then 2 whole books we get this flashback narrative to the fall of Troy with the famous Trojan horse, and how the Trojans got to Carthage in the first place. And she's sort of, the Trojans or the Carthaginians are all, spellbound by this tale. They fall silent and just listen. And then we've moved through 3 books of 12, and book 4 really it has always been one of the most famous parts of the poem. And this is Dido falling in love. So the story has been told, and we focused on the Queen Dido. This book will be all about her. Things will get rapidly quite unhappy, and things will go badly. But for this brief moment, we have this sort of hinge where she's falling in love, but she hasn't done anything. She's scared. She's a widow, right? So she has had a former husband who's been murdered. So she's conflicted. She's falling in love again, but she's not sure what to do because she's conflicting emotions. And she says to her sister Anna, I can't sleep. What's going on? Who is this guy? And this to me has always been one of my favorite moments. It's very humane. It's very modern. It's, the person falling in love. It could have been written yesterday. And she's saying to Anna basically, what am I going to do here? I'm bound to my old husband, my dead husband, but this man has arrived. And she just spills all to her sister and her confidant, who is Anna. Yeah, and that's really the great achievement of the poem. A lot of times when we read this ancient literature, we have to acclimatize ourselves to it. We have to get the references, or we have to realize that what they're saying is. And yet, at its very best, and I would rank Dido amongst the very best of what the Romans wrote about, it's just instantaneously recognizable. The relationship, falling in love, a breakup, the emotion, the way it's told, the pacing of the narrative, nothing is dragged or nothing is delayed. It's just entirely humane, and a breath of fresh air when you're reading a massive long poem full of difficult themes. Book 4 is the first thing that I read properly in Latin, and to me it never quite gets any better. There are other great authors and other great moments and lots of richness in different authors. But just the modernity, the humanity, the way he observes human emotions is never bettered in book 4. There's one line where he's describing how Dido is realizing that Aeneas is going to leave. So she senses, she knows what's going on. He hasn't said anything, but she's like, all right, this guy is not going to stay around. And the line is, in brackets, who can deceive a lover? So how can you ever deceive your partner? They know what's going on, So just that sort of line, that half line in brackets, that sort of told me all I needed to know. That was really sort of thrilling to have something so modern.